Hey there, Greg with Boom Up Engineering. Figured we'd take a moment to talk about mounting foot ascenders once again. Figured I'd do a normal video on showing my Klein Spurs and how I came about mounting a couple different foot ascenders. Um, First off, I had started with a Kiwi Climber because I knew that would be a lot easier to mount. It's already got these mounting holes ready to go, and they'll fit as big as a 5/16" screw. And that's what I used on my Klein Spurs. Kind of wish maybe I used 1/4 inch. The 1/4 inch would fit in these holes a little bit easier, so you don't have to have the layout of your holes perfect for the screws to fit. But anyway, I went 5/16 by 1/2 inch long screws. So I did a drill and tap down the center of the spine of the Klein Spurs. And so that's easy enough. And so I mounted the Kiwi Climber. I went direct to the spur and done. Then you've got a good foot ascender mounted to the spur. But I prefer the notch jet steps. They're very rope friendly. You don't have to lock them on. The Kiwi Climber has a locking pin to keep the cam engaged with the rope. You have to push it. It takes a little bit of effort on this one, but you have to push that stud up to keep the cam from opening. That locks it on your rope. Jet step, it just is what it is. There is no lock. You get your rope in there, and as long as you don't get too out of a line with your rope, if you don't kick out, then you're all good. And I typically don't have any problems with kicking out. And I was using this today, and I had no issues, didn't kick out once. And I just like it because it's easier to get the rope, for me anyway. Get the rope out when I'm done climbing. One nice thing, or it happened to work out good with this jet step, is I didn't do any modifications. The only thing I did was when I took the straps off the bottom, I cut the stitches with a razor knife so that it was easy, to salvage the strap. So when my strap wears out on my other notch jet step, then I've got a replacement strap ready to go. I just have to stitch it on. So to mount the jet step, though, I had to come up with a bracket that would offset the foot ascender a little bit and allow me to bolt it up. And so what I ended up using is some scrap 1/4 inch. I did some dumpster diving at work, and I kind of cobbled it out of aluminum using a Makita cordless cutter. I think those run a 5 3/8 blade, but that's a super handy way to be cutting light metals, especially aluminum. It goes right through it like a hot knife. But it's made quick work of this 1/4 inch aluminum. And then when I was done, or at least today when I took this apart, I rounded some of the corners off and kind of helped the finish a little bit. So anyway, I come up with this kind of like L-shaped bracket to use my existing holes in the spur to mount the jet step. No modifications. If you can see in there, I got two screws. Those are 4mm button heads. I could have used 5mm, but the heads were just a little bit taller on the 5mm. But one nice thing about these holes in the foot ascender is that they're already recessed a certain amount. Not quite enough to get the heads of these 4mm screws below the surface, but close enough. So these cams need to be able to open, and they swing over the top of those screws. And so if you pick up on the cam and you swing it open, it doesn't hit. But if you push down, there's a little bit of slop in this mechanism here between these two plates. But they just barely graze over the top of those screws. And if I may do it, doesn't really matter. But I could just barely sand the top of those screws down just to, 10 or 20 thousandths, and then they're not gonna make that. They're not gonna touch it all. So like I say, no modifications. That was nice. I just had to make this bracket, which offsets the climber, helps keep your climbing rope from getting stabbed by your spur, your spike there. So these 4mm screws, I just did a through hole through my bracket here, and then just put nuts on the back side. These are nylocks. I use the 4mm bolts because that's what I had on hand. I just have a bunch of hardware, and 3, 4, and 5, and 6mm just for doing odd projects. Stainless steel, so plenty strong for what this is. I guess if you compare these 4mm bolts, you could compare them to these rivets here that hold these two cams. And these rivets are under quite a bit of stress because not only are they holding your weight when you're standing on this sender, they're also trying to be pushed apart by when this thing is camming down on your rope. So anyway, no issues. Like I say, it worked great today. Never kicked out once. The bracket, I cut it away in this shape just to help fit the backside of this foot ascender, but you could probably literally grab a piece of aluminum flat bar, cut it into this rectangular shape, just to, big enough to mount your 2 holes there and your 2 holes there, and that's probably good enough. Probably don't necessarily have to cut it out like I did. But other than that, I guess it's all straightforward. The only thing I would say, I had to mount the foot ascender high enough to where I had enough room to run my foot strap above the spike and below the foot ascender. And then after using it just a little bit today, I realized I need to round all the corners off and round the edges off so it doesn't chew into my strap as the strap and the spur move around as I move around. So I did that today. I put some nice radiuses on there and took the sharp edges off there, and shouldn't be any issue there. So it does kind of hold my strap down a little bit, but that's maybe actually a good thing. Helps keep the spur located on my foot. So obviously I like having a foot ascender on my spurs. It just seems like, at least with the trees I'm climbing now and learning and all that, it's just handy to have a spike, whether I'm doing takedowns or not, just to help me in a spot or two to get it to monkey around the tree. So, like I say, nothing wrong with the Kiwi Climber, just that I like being able to get onto the rope and not have to do any additional set any locks to keep it locked to the rope, because it seemed like with the Kiwi Climber I did kick out a fair bit without setting that lock button there. So one nice thing about the Jet Step is it is cheaper than the Kiwi Climber. They're possibly $50 cheaper to get the notch. Of course, I think, is this an Australian company that makes the Kiwi Climber? It's probably a good company you're supporting, so I guess that's a good reason sometimes to buy certain products. But anyway, one option that I was going to work on was mounting the CT foot ascender. It seems pretty cool. I'm going to have some other CT stuff. I like how it locks open and stuff. And this could be removable. This will lock. The foot ascender will lock onto this menagerie of steel plates here that are meant to sandwich the shank of your climbing spurs. So it's kind of a generic way to mount a foot ascender to any set of spurs, as long as the screws are long enough and you can run your shank of your spur through there. Now this is all steel, so it's a substantial amount of steel, and it's getting heavy. Add in the foot ascender. I'm not sure what that weighs, but you might be adding a couple pounds there just to one of your spurs. So I hadn't really messed with this. If I was going to mount this to the spurs, I thought maybe I would take this one thin plate, the plate that it locks to, and use that to mount the spur to the Klein. You literally could, I would almost hate to do it, but you could probably get out the TIG welder or even the wire feeder and mount that to your spur and have it to where you can click this off and on. But haven't done that. I'll probably, sell this. I don't really need it. But again, no issues with the jet step. I really like it. It worked flawless today, and I don't think I have any more work to do to make this pretty much perfect. Again, like I say, if anybody's doing this, I just had to make sure I had enough room there to run my strap, soften the edges, round the edges over so you don't tear up your strap, come up with whatever bracket, buy a few screws, and, Bob's your uncle. So, works pretty good. If you guys have any questions, comments, or any concerns to express, yeah, just leave some comments. Like I say, this is a very stout setup. I have some notch steel spurs, and there's not nearly the steel in them, and I mean these are stiff and as rigid as can be. Same with the bracket. Like I say, I've got more aluminum in my bracket than the Kiwi Climber does. This is 6 millimeter thick aluminum, or almost 5.9 mil, and this is quarter inch, so it's 6.35 millimeters. So it's pretty rigid. So there's more cross section here. So like I say, there's no flex, and it's going to be around for years, or as long as I need it to be. These screws are pretty short. They're tapped into the steel there. I may want to put just a little bit of thread locker on there. But if they ever did come loose, I guess it's not the end of the world. I know that these the spikes are, at least on these Kleins, those are definitely Loctited in there. At least mine were, because or was it these? Might have been the notches. I can't remember now. But I did remove the spikes, and I had to take a torch and heat them up to weaken the thread locker a little bit. Otherwise, I know the cheap bit that I had bought from Harbor Freight, it sheared off when I used my cordless Makita Impact. So just something to be aware if you ever take these off. But yeah, great setup. I like the Kleins because they have a nice stirrup here. Don't necessarily need the curvature, but it's narrow enough that it fits my boots tightly. And there's since it captures the, I guess that would be the shank of the boot, these things don't twist like my steel notch spurs do. These stay in place perfectly good, and no issues there. So I like just standard buckle straps. I don't need Velcro. Don't even want Velcro. I think these are easier to use, and yeah, good stuff. So like I said, if you got any questions, give me a holler. Thanks.